Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another EU Made Simple live stream. Today from, okay, probably should mute myself here. To another EU Made Simple live stream, and today we're going to be doing it in real life. Normally you're used to seeing me through a screen, but now we're actually sitting here speaking with guests, which is incredibly cool. I want to see if the audio works fine, so I'm just going to have a little look at what people are saying. People are already saying hello, so I think the audio is fine. Could you introduce yourself maybe so we can also check the audio and see if everything works?
Yes, of course. So first, thanks for having me.
Of course.
I'm really happy to do this with you. My name is Lena Schilling. I'm the youngest member of the European Parliament. I'm 23 years old. I was a climate activist back in Austria, and that's how I started. And then I became the leading candidate of the Austrian Greens for these European elections. And now I'm in the European Parliament trying to fight for climate justice.
Okay, good. I see the audio works. Video a little bit of a stutter, but I don't think we can do much about that right now. We'll look at that afterwards. But okay, if that's all good, then I would like to go over some questions that we prepared in advance. But first of all, we would like to ask a simple question to every single MEP, and that is, how did you get into politics? And then, of course, why the Greens? Why die Grüne Alternative, I believe, in Austria? And yeah, please.
So I think there are many good reasons to go into politics, and for me the main reason is really like justice. I think we grow up and we're reading to our children these books where we see there are these basic values of we need to respect each other, we should respect the nature, we should be like, if you're different than me, that's also okay, like these really basic things.
Sure. And
then you're growing up and you learn that's not true. That what we're telling our children is actually not true. And that's what I wanted to change, because I think these basic values should be also our values when we grow up in a more complicated world. And my mom is a social worker and I grew up in a working class district in Vienna. And really much she was the person that always told me, okay, you have to stand up for justice, and if you don't do it, nobody will.
Okay.
And that's what I try to do now. And why with the Greens? Because I believe the Greens are really the only party that in the end steps up for climate politics when it depends. I think many parties are interested in climate politics, but at the heart it's just the Greens. So that's why I'm with the Greens.
And I guess a large part of that is also the justice part. We're trying to stand up for, I guess, minorities in this case as well, and the less disenfranchised in our societies. But I see that people are saying that the video isn't smooth, but the audio is. I think we can charge. Could you plug in the charger? I think it already will help. It's there, but the audio is more important, obviously, because even though watching is very cool, the audio is actually what matters. Okay, so thank you for that. I would like to go into some of the actual topics, and obviously you've already mentioned it, but I believe you just came back from the COP29 climate conference. Could you tell your first experience there? Because quite a lot of news articles were talking about the double-sidedness of it, of holding such a conference in a, let's say, not the most green country in the world, and that the actual policies or agreements that came out of it were so-so, let's say. So what are your first impressions of the conference?
I think what we saw there is that climate conferences in autocratic fossil regimes are not the best thing to do.
Not the best.
What we're seeing is in Azerbaijan, human rights are violated, and the people there who stand up for climate justice, who talk about what the regime does to people, also on like environmental and climate policies, is awful. They get arrested. And what we have seen before the conference even started is that one of the leaders of the conference wanted to make behind the door deals, like selling oil and gas on a climate conference. So that doesn't make sense at all. So yes, I think it's very important to see that we need other climate conferences and we need much more commitment. Many leaders of the world weren't there, and we can't just say climate crisis, okay, we will deal with it in 2 years.
Sure.
And I think that's the main point. And like with the outcomes, we tripled the climate finance in 2035. But of course, it's not enough for the global south, because right now the climate crisis is something we are experiencing now. We have seen the floods, we have seen the droughts, we have seen the wildfires, and it's happening in Europe, but also even more in the global south, especially in countries that didn't much contribute to this crisis. So I think there's also this question of justice. So yes, we need much more climate finance, but it is a first mini step.
Sure. It ties back into your the reason why you started doing this, right? The justice part is a very large topic within climate change as well. So moving on from the conference, I'm very interested in hearing what is the EU currently doing and what could it do better in your opinion? And obviously you're from the Greens, so a lot more could be done probably, is what I'm assuming. But please, go ahead. What do you think about that? On climate yes, on climate policies,
Okay.
What are we doing and what do you think could be better or is already good?
Okay, what we're seeing is in the last term, von der Leyen came up with this Green Deal.
Yes.
And pretty much introduced it to the world. And right now and even in the end of the last term, we saw backtracking. We saw that main aspects of this Green Deal were watered down, were delayed, where we have seen some just didn't come. And now in this term, we have even a worse majority. So the far right in this parliament is pretty strong. And I'm sitting in committees with them, and they are denying the climate crisis, the human-made climate crisis. They are denying the basic scientific achievements we have right now. So what we need to do is really fight for every little baby step. And we are seeing that the EPP is backtracking a lot. Deforestation is a good example.
Right.
We have a deforestation regulation. Now it should just start, and it will be delayed for at least 1 year. And let's see if it's gonna get watered down, what influence will be taken, but that's awful. And for that, I have to say this Green Deal, it needs to continue, it needs to be much stronger, and we need also to talk about the social aspect of climate crisis and creating jobs for people where there are future jobs, there are green jobs. And I think it depends, because we need to finally connect the climate crisis with the social crisis.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you mentioned an important point there, is that there is a certain rise in the right wing throughout Europe, and that is seen within member states, countries, but also in our last parliamentary elections, the European ones. So I'm guessing at some point you're going to have to get these people along with the plan as well. And I'm curious to your view on this opposition to these climate plans, or even, like you said, the scientific basis. What can be done to include these maybe voters or even these parties, or is that even possible? Can you not work with these people at all? Or I guess I'm asking your opinion on that.
I think there are two different topics. The first one is many people are right now frustrated from politics. And I totally understand that, because we're living in a time of crisis and there is much anxiety, and for this anxiety there is a reason. So that's something I'm understanding, and especially as a young person, I think many young persons in Europe think about, okay, how to finance my rent, how to finance my life. We are seeing the war, we are seeing the pandemic. So like in the last year, so much happened, and we kind of have not that easy solutions for it. And I think what we need to do, and yes, these people are approachable, because politics is not just something that we're talking about in the parliament.
Of course.
It happens with the people that speak with each other, it happens in schools, it happens in works. So of course, and I think first it's important to really also face the anxieties and the fears and also the frustration that is here, and then work on policies that really help them, and not have just a populistic approach and say, when we get all the foreign people out of Europe, everything will be great again. That's not a solution. No. That will help in the end nobody. And I think what we need to do is really work on real solutions, and at the same time face that we have problems.
Sure. So to recap that point, you're really saying that a lot of this anxiety that, let's say, more right-wing people have right now is totally grounded, and it obviously has a source. But it maybe not necessarily have something to do with climate change itself. It's just that people are currently more anxious about other topics.
Yes.
And that's what you hear all the time, right? It's like, I can't think about the climate right now because I'm trying to pay rent, or
Yes.
I'm trying to afford my car, for example, to get to work because I need it. So yeah, I think it's a very difficult and also important topic to get more people in who are maybe not that subscribed to the more green, the more left way of thinking of we want more climate change policies. Okay, thank you. And just as a final thought on climate change, where do you think it's going right now? Is like the future prospect of climate change? Is it looking negative? Is it looking positive in your view? How do we move, for example, even the other larger polluters like China and the United States?
Like now, after these US elections and the geopolitical situation that is everything but easy, it would be easy to lose hope.
Yeah.
It would be so easy to just say, okay, we will give up. We tried, we had a climate movement, now we are at this point. Doesn't matter, we can just go on, like do everything like we used to. Let's just stop talking about it. But this would be too easy. I think the main point is starting in difficult times and finding sources for hope.
Okay.
Because there is still our future to win, and there are so many things we can achieve and we can work for. And we really need dedication, and we need passion, and we need, I think that's the one thing, to create trust again. Okay.
It's a nice, hopeful message, even though it might, for people who are looking at the climate, sometimes be a bit bleak. Yes. We have a question from our live audience, and I think it's just to tie in, or one final question on the climate, which I think you might be able to answer. User HGVD asks, I wonder how we can do this Green Deal without undermining our own companies. And that is a point that you hear also often, is the balance between our industries and companies and the Green Deal. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's absolutely right. And we need also to think about it connected. These topics are connected. When we're talking about our economy and like how to develop it, we have to face that states as China already much further in the progress with electric cars, as example.
Yep.
So we need security for our industry, and to make this transformation together. There is not something like we, the people who think the climate crisis is a problem, are against like the companies and the jobs. That's not the case. We need to create green jobs and keep our economy, but also find solutions for the climate crisis and connect these topics. And there is also a chance in it, because if we go on and have like the security and give like companies the possibility to really implement the legislation we have and go further, we can be again like this leader thing we're always telling about the European Union, which is sometimes more of a joke.
We like to pretend that we're the leaders sometimes.
Yes. And I guess it's a nice narrative. I also would like that we're the leaders.
Maybe as a final thought, it's kind of maybe a bit sad in the way that this is technology that has been out there for a while, but we're kind of letting the leading role slip away to China, for example, on electric vehicles. But that's not the only thing, because like you already mentioned, you are the youngest MEP right now in the parliament, and I guess I just wanted to go into a bit about youth politics with you. And I guess to start out, the first question, is the youth engaged with politics in your view, yes or no? Is there an increase, a decrease? What are your thoughts on that right now?
Partly. I think there is a small, interested and privileged group of young people that can be very engaged in European politics. And that are great people I'm working a lot with, but at the same time, we're leaving very young people behind, because, like I tried to mention, politics is so often a question of privilege. If you have like the family situation, enough money to really think about politics and engage in organizations and do like so much unpaid work, because I did that also for many years. And that's the first point. And the second one is, we're talking about such complex things, where I started now, so I'm reading all of these files, and it needs hours and hours and hours and hours, and who has time for that? So I think what we need to do is make politics more approachable and also understandable. So when I'm talking about like, I don't know, the ban of new fossil infrastructure.
Sure.
Then I have to make examples for that. Then I have to
Yeah.
explain people why we not have like so much subsidies in fossil fuels and how much money we actually just give fossil fuel companies
Yeah.
instead of young people who need it for their education.
Yeah.
And I think they're very much of a comparison. And also, and I think that's the third point maybe, there are just not enough young people in politics. So I think we have a completely different reality of our life than many 60-year-old white men who have been in this business for about 40 years. They have a completely other view of the world than young people do that just grow up and read a bit of media.
Yeah.
So I think also representation is key.
Sure. So there's two elements that I would like to focus on. One is that you already think that there isn't enough, so more young people should try at least to go into some form of politics. And the second part that you mentioned is the more digestible parts of politics to try and get more engaging with the population. I wanted to know your idea on the role of social media in that. And that it can sometimes be a useful tool, but also be misused in many different ways in the realm of politics I'm just talking about right now. So what do you think about the use of social media within, well, I guess this youth politics or politics in general? And should we have more? Should we have less? Should anything change in that?
I think we need clear roles for social media, and we're talking always now, we're having, everybody then talks about regulation and the AI Act and the Digital Service Act, and of course we need all of this legislation, but at the same time we really need education how to work with social media.
Yeah.
I grew up with it, and at the same time sometimes I'm not